session of EHR component functionality. This week we're going to focus on Module 8, which is chat service. It's one of my more favorite components to talk about, only because I am actually really surprised at how many people are actually completely unaware that it exists. So without further ado, let's get into it. So with Module 8, chat service, we have already kind of talked about some of these things. David Taylor was very nice to give us a kind of a history of where we came from, where we are, and where we're going. We're going to talk about the chat services object, give you kind of an idea where it's potentially located on your system. Briefly, management of the different columns and layouts, the user sessions, the processes, log times, etc. How the dialog area and message area coordinate with each other, and the different options that you can use, such as clear, send, and then we'll kind of broach into special considerations, just so you have a good understanding of how the system works. So, what is a chat service object? Well, basically, it's a way for a group of users to communicate with one another. Like, hey, well, isn't that the message broadcast? Yes, but no. This is actually a way to communicate back and forth and see what the previous conversation was about. It's also hidden off to the side so it doesn't blast people in the face unless you choose to have it in front of your face. So it is similar in that it provides communication, but it operates quite a bit differently. It displays to all users who have accepted an invite, so that's one of the issues with it. It does only present to those that have been issued an invitation and have accepted. It's external to the EHR. That's one thing I always kind of liked about it. As I just said before, it doesn't blast up in front of your face. It's kind of off to the side when it's opened. However, it does close whenever the EHR is shut down. So it's separate from the actual EHR main window, but it's still tied to the EHR. The EHR has to be up and running in order for it to be functional. So, where is this chat service button located? And this is where I think it gets kind of interesting, because it's not a typical component. It's not something you just hang on a tab or a grouper panel or anything like that. You have to locate it in the two places that, or the two ways I know of to access the chat services is either A, someone has actually made it its own special program launcher, which is basically AKA a button, or they have to access it through the desktop toolbar, and I usually see that under the options menu. Kind of go and an idea where that's located. On the standardized GUI, where that would be located is somewhere up here, and this is what I mean by the desktop bar. It'd be somewhere up here, usually under tools or options, and you'll have to kind of drill down into it, and it'll be literally called chat. Or the second option is, like I said, some kind of program launcher. Like I have here, I'm just demonstrating a whole row of program launchers in which chat is one of those programmer launcher options. So before we get too deep into the column, I always provide a little breakdown on column management, mainly because people forget about column management all the time, including our physicians, just due to the nature of some training programs. It's as I like to describe it, some people call their training program where they go over the EHR in 2 hours a training program, when in reality that is not a training program. That is an overview, and it's a scream through of the EHR, and a lot is lost. Through my experience, have noticed that you'd be surprised that a number of your users have no idea how to manage columns, or that they can be resized even. So I always kind of provide this little basic column management in all my presentations, just in case you choose to use these components in the future. You at least have this kind of drilled into it in case they miss it in the previous module. So things about column management. They can be clicked. Different sections like columns can be clicked to organize. You can drag it to resize it, especially when you get into a specific component. As I said before, it's a separate object off to the side. You can make it bigger or smaller, the actual whole window, just to fit whatever works for you. And this whole concept of clicking columns, resizing, dragging and resizing the size of the columns or the whole object, etc., it's universal throughout the entire EHR. This is not any unique concept to just this component. And that's one piece I always want to kind of hammer home. People always think, oh, it's only for this component or that component. I struggle to find an area where basic column management cannot be done in the EHR. That always in mind. So what does that mean? Well, as I said before, you can click on the top of a column here to organize. You can click on the actual, if you notice the column bar, you can drag it to see if it's larger. Heck, you can go to this little window here, in which most people do. They drag this window over to hide some of the information we'll talk about today. A lot of times people hide that information. And you can, of course, grab the entire window and change the whole size. So again, it's a very modifiable to optimize the look and feel to how the user needs or wants it. Okay. Now that we've gotten out of the column management, as I like to call it, let's talk about the chat service and its layout. What makes up a chat service object? What's in it? What makes it work? Well, of course, you have the users. It's going to give you information about what station they're at, the session, the process, the login time. Honestly, a lot of that I don't think is going to be very useful, but we'll go into that briefly so you at least know what it is about in case someone asks you. Because when I was a student, I always kind of was one of those curious people. Like I didn't like the answer of, "Hey, you won't use it." I was kind of like, "Well, okay, great, so I'm not using it, but what is it?" So you'll at least have that bit of information. We'll talk about the dialog area, which is separate from the message area. There's basically a place where you can read information and an area where you enter information. And then, of course, there's a clear and send button to message. So here is the chat service display. Here is the first column we were talking about, which we were looking at what users have been invited. Here's the station. This is where the session is located, the process, and the login time. When did they sign into the system? Here is the dialog area we were just talking about a minute ago. And here is the message area. There are clear buttons. And there is two, and we'll explain why there is two. And then, of course, the send. So, before you can even get into any of these layouts or pieces or anything like that, the one thing that I see some people struggle with is you have to send out an invite. Everybody, in order to use the chat service, has to be invited, and in return, besides being invited, they have to accept. And that's where it gets kind of a little clunky to use sometimes. So in order to actually invite somebody, once you found the chat service object, wherever it is located in your system, you have to right-click on the mouse in the empty space on the left where like the users and everything is, and you have to choose the option to chat. And here is a screenshot. I clicked over into the participants area, right-clicked. It gave me that little box to say invite. Once you hit that invite option, it'll present to you a new dialog, and in this dialog, it'll show all the EHR users that are logged into the system currently, and those are the individuals that you can invite. Here's what it looks like. In this particular instance, there's only one other person logged in, but this is how it would present to you. It would basically give you a list of all the different pieces, almost very similar to the message broadcast system. You get everybody that is possible in this. You have to go through and click and check those. So now that you know where you can pick these people, what selection methods do you have? Well, of course, as we've discussed before, again, selection is going to be the same theme throughout all these modules. It'll never change. You can do the control key, where you hold the control key and click a whole bunch of people. You can do the shift key, where you click the like the topmost part of the group, hold the shift, and then select the bottommost member of the group, and everything in between will work. And it still holds true that before you start trying to send messages or do anything, you do need to select these people and have them ready. Otherwise, it's not going to go anywhere. Now, once you've clicked, you've invited a very special somebody to join your team for your discussions. So I'll talk a little bit more about team options towards the end here. An invite notice will be sent out, and this is where it does get a little, I wouldn't say difficult, but this is one of the challenges. Basically, once you send that invite, in the lower right-hand corner of the EHR will display a lightning bolt. Very similar to like how notifications display. Like if you get a high alert notification, it'll do a little lightning bolt and say, hey, there is a critical lab value. It'd be a very similar process. Displays in the lower right-hand part of the EHR. Now, the thing to keep in mind, and this is where it also gets kind of clunky, it doesn't stay forever. And that's where some people have to work or develop a workflow on how they will relay that they're sending an invite over there, because it only lasts about 15 seconds from what I can tell. I took a stopwatch, and every time it came up with about 15 seconds. Once you see that notice, the person has to click on that little lightning bolt or notice message, and at that point, they will be entered into the chat discussion. So, as you can see, here is the full-blown EHR. In the lower right-hand corner, you can see the little lightning bolt, and it says invitation to chat from the person that sent it. In this case, it was user C. So, once that's done, user B says, yep, I want to join that. They accept it. Once they accept it, this is what the chat session or chat services dialog will now look like. You will see the users that have accepted into the session on the left-hand side, where in this case you see user C and B. And at the very top, it'll actually say in the dialog box, user B, MD, has joined the dialog. So in a way, this is good. In a way, it's bad. And I'd say it's more good. You can kind of see when people enter your chat sessions. So obviously, if I had a running conversation with somebody back and forth, let's say a team, and then user B signed in, everything before the point user B signed in is something they're not going to have. So you can kind of see where they come into the conversation, or make sure everybody you need is in the conversation before you get started, but that's just a one little eye on. All right. So, again, what is a user? Very simple definition. Anybody accepting an invite to chat service. The user display is here in that first column. It'll usually be a last name first. If you notice, if you have been set up correctly, and this is where I kind of say everybody's a team, if their suffix is in the system correctly, they should have their suffix there. In this case, user B is an MD. If it doesn't show up, it may be something to report to your informatics and HIM teams to have that addressed, or the individual themselves to have it addressed with the appropriate identified individuals. But this is where it will show up. Next, we'll talk about what is station. Again, it's all the same stuff from the message broadcast area. Station is a unique identifier given to each computer terminal, desktops, or laptops that you have at your location. And it's used to locate and connect computers for routine service and maintenance, basically. It's heavily used by your IT team. If you ever are trying to do it where they're trying to connect to your computer remotely. I forget what the service is called off the top of my head. But basically, if they are going to do that, they usually need to know the computer you're at. If you give them that identifier, they're usually able to quickly and efficiently log into your system. Where is that located? Again, that's a second column in. Again, on the same chat services dialog. Session. Unique identifier generated when a session is created. I'll be quite honest, as with message broadcasts, I have seen no real use for end users for this. Heck, it's usually hidden, and when I spoke to most IT professionals, they don't really have a use for it. At least not that's been identified to me at this point. So that's what it is, unique identifier, tagging the actual session in the server that your system is using. But for all intents and purposes, it's hidden. Your end users aren't going to use it. That's where it's located. Process, internal entry number of the RPMS job associated with the EHR logon. Now, this has some use to your RPMS administrators. Again, probably very little use to any of your end users, but your RPMS administrators can use that to find individual sessions related to that entry, and they can kill the session. That can be useful if you've ever had a situation where Dr. A has logged on to 3 computers, he's on a patient, people need to get into that patient, but nobody can find where he's at with that terminal, or he says that he did shut it down, but RPMS still says it's active. This is one of those situations where the session is hung. An RPMS administrator, if they have that process number, can go into the background of RPMS and kill that individual process. Where is that located? Very simply, it's the next column over. All right, login time literally is the time the user logged into their RPMS EHR. Not really much functional use to most people unless they're trying to find out, maybe like if they happen to know that they logged in 10 minutes behind each other to help locate a certain session, maybe. But for all intents and purposes, I really have not seen anybody use this, but that's what it's there for. Usually it's hidden. Login time. Now the dialog area. What is the dialog area? The best way I can describe the dialog area is how I have it here. It is, for all intents and purposes, a longitudinal record of the conversations by an author, or basically by a team. I mean, it doesn't even have to really, when I term author, it's not the person that did the original invite. Anybody on that team technically can be an author. So each one of every entry that is entered by whoever authors it will be located in this dialog area. And here's what it looks like. You direct your intentions over here to the dialog area. You can see at the very top, I'll try to read it to you in case it's small. You can see where user C joined the dialog. I then had user B, the MD, and I'm trying to give you an idea as a workflow here. Student, please ready room 8 or room 5. Student C responds, sure, anything specific needed? The MD, nope, just wanted to give you a heads up. C, okay, let me know if there's anything else. MD said, actually, yes. I put in an order for patient blah, 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 blah. Get a dose of APAP. Can you administer? Sure, no problem. I will review the order in the EHR and get back to you if I have questions. That's actually how I've seen it kind of used. You have to be careful with the patient names and numbers. It is a secure messaging system. It does not pop up in anybody, but you do have to be careful when you do read and use it. But that is a scenario I have heard some providers do. So what is the messaging area? Basically, it's basically the messaging, your message you're typing to the end users that have all accepted. Very simple. It's just a display area to see the longitudinal record in the area where you actually type your message. It's located down here to the bottom right. Clear button, very simple. Clears all text in the message area. I do want to note that there is a different clear button for the dialogue and message areas. So if you notice here, you have a clear. That clear button is going to affect the dialogue message area. This clear button is going to affect the message area. Sorry, let me go back one. So there's 2 separate clear areas. Again, to just make that as a point. If for some reason the top dialogue area is getting way too busy or has really old stuff that's no longer pertinent, you may want to clear that up just to make it a little bit easier to read through. But there are separate clear areas. So if you're hitting one button and you're like, why is my message not clearing? I don't understand, or vice versa. This would be why. There's 2 different ones and they have 2 different. And finally, the send button does just what it says. Sends the message in the message area to all end users displayed in the user column. So do keep in mind, this isn't a like message broadcast. You kind of switch between who you want to send at that time. When you write messages here, it goes to everybody in that message group that has been invited. So pretty much anybody in your user list is all going to get this information. So do keep that in mind. Again, the send display, this is a little button there to the bottom. And here is all the people that are going to receive it. All right, so we went through the basic functionality of the chat service. I'm actually a fan of it. I like it much more than broadcast. But there are some things we need to think about. How does it work for you? And most importantly, do your users have a use for it? So 1, as I stated before, it pops up as a separate dialog, and I'll show that when we launch the EHR during our hands-on. It is completely separate, its own little window. So your EHR can be minimized, this can be up, this can be minimized while your EHR is up. You can have it if you have multiple screens, you can move it to another screen. It's literally its own little dialog that does not affect the EHR. In fact, I've had providers tell me that they use the messages that they're getting back from their team to read and look at the EHR to get a better idea of what they're actually talking about. So again, separate dialogue. Can be moved anywhere, minimized, etc. The main thing is it is tied to the EHR. So if you click and close down your EHR, it's gone. And everything that was written in there is gone. It's not that you're going to re-sign in, join that session, and get all the information back. No. Once the EHR shuts down, whatever you had is gone. It doesn't affect anybody else. They'll get a notice that the user left the meeting, I believe, if I remember correctly. So everybody, it won't affect anybody else, but you will no longer have that longitudinal record. It does support, and this is what I said before, it does support continuous conversation. That's one of the biggest problems I had about message broadcast. One, they'll send a message, they may not know the context of that information, especially if they're following along much later in the afternoon, or they just forget. I mean, we've all seen the message dialogues. They're very short. If you accidentally X them out, they're gone. And there is no following up on the messages. I mean, if you take those message broadcast pieces, and if you didn't get rid of them, well, how are you organizing them? Did you organize them in the flow of the actual conversation or not? I mean, context is everything. So that's one thing I like about this. You can see the conversation as it unfolds. However, as I said before, it's still a risk for PHI. You don't want to open that up in front of patients. You may be transmitting information that they're not really supposed to see. Again, the advantage, though, here is it's not like the broadcast where it just blasts right in front of the user. It'll go to wherever you have that dialogue. You just have to be conscientious and have that dialogue hidden somewhere until you are in a good space to read it. So yes. And again, as I understand it, this is not, if you have 3 sessions open, it's only on the session you have, to my understanding. So if you have 3 sessions open, you have to have 3 separate invites and invite yourself, technically.